everyone, and welcome. This is episode 352 of Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Network. I'm James, joined by the whole gang here, Ryan and Paul in this week, and we still don't know who the Brewers are going to play in the playoffs, and we thought we would, but we'll get to that in a second. But first, as always, how have your weekends been, everyone?
Football, very, very good. Liverpool had a nice win on Saturday. The football, very, very bad. Very, very bad this weekend. So, not so great.
Hey, the Packers almost won. That's something.
The Packers game was dumb, and they almost won, but also played terribly. And sometimes it's just hard to square those things. But it was both a game I gave up on and then knew I was going to be mad about for the entire second half. I like they're going to get close, but it's never going to be that close, and it's just going to be infuriating. And then they even screwed up the comeback like twice, and the Vikings just gave it back. I'm like, nope, try again, and just couldn't get it done. So, and the Badgers were also like same experience, kind of the opposite. Like since they jumped out to that stupid lead, and you knew it was like well, that's not going to work. Like they're not they're not going to hold that. They were lucky to get to this lead. That will not repeat itself, and it did not. So. It was fine. Had a good weekend.
Other than that,
lots of birthday parties because there are infinity children with birthday parties in my neighborhood. So at least one every weekend, usually 5 or 7. And that's it. Looking forward to
birthday parties and festivals.
Yes.
Yeah. As Steve is my witness, I called it that Badger game. I'm like, hey, when they were up 21-10, I'm like, hey, all it'll take is another 3 or 4 catastrophically bad plays for USC, and the Badgers might actually have a chance at winning this thing. So that was
exactly right.
Yeah, it was. And
very
then
they remembered they have 8 feet tall receivers that are going to the NFL, and the Badgers have no defensive backs that can cover any of them. It was bad. Yeah. All right. Let's move on. We've got some Patreon questions this weekend to get to about the playoffs, even though we don't know who's going to win. So a reminder, as always, you can go become a patron at patreon.com/MKE Tailgate. $2 a month guarantees you get your questions answered both on this podcast and on reporting as eligible. Plenty to talk about there. $5 gets you that perk on both podcasts, but you also get minor league extras with Ryan and Spencer, as well as Paul's mini pods. Ryan, when are you and Spencer going to do something to kind of wrap up the season?
Yeah, Spencer and I are going to try to do something. It's going to be difficult this week because I'm planning on going to any games they're playing. So that kind of knocks out those evenings pretty well. But maybe try to get something, look and see if there's a call for questions on Monday. I haven't heard back from Spencer yet. So you keep your eyes out. We definitely got to talk about the Arizona Fall League because the Brewers are sending much more consequential players to the Arizona Fall League than they have in recent years. There's actually some pretty interesting names on there. So obviously like Wilkin being the number 1, but Coleman Crow is on there, as is Luis Lara. There's a bunch of guys who actually, some other people worth talking about too. So we got to get into that and kind of wrap the season and all of that. So we'll be trying to get one of those done here in the next week or so. We'll see how it shakes out.
Paul, looking ahead to another mini pod. I didn't get a chance to listen to the Vikings one, I don't think, or both halves of it. But,
I would say it did a good job of portraying the Vikings for what they are, which is a very, very intelligently run, if not juggernaut, like tough out, a team that you really have to play really well against. It was an interesting game because, I'm not sure I can't claim the mini pod was super prescient, but I do think it was in that beating Brian Flores requires you to stand in the face of very confusing blitzes and actually take a lot of chance throws. And that is what the Packers did, both to great success and great tragedy. Jordan Love was under pressure on 21% of his dropbacks and was only sacked 1 time. And so essentially did that and hit a lot of those downfield plays, big plays to Jaden Reed. It's how they came back. But guys dropping stuff and Jordan floating him up.
Tavian. Oh, man.
One of Jordan's interceptions, I don't remember if it was his first or his second, but he threw just like a rainbow ball to Dontavian Wicks on the sideline, and he got baited into that throw. It just a great defensive call by Flores. They brought a corner from that side and faded to safety over at the last second, and Love didn't see the fade. And so it was a very cleverly defensed game that the Packers, I think, played essentially correctly and just kept screwing. Didn't do enough correct to get it done. But it wasn't terrible. Good game plan.
Other than special teams, yeah. All right.
Sign Harrison Mevis right now, please.
All right. Be on the lookout for both that Minor League Extra and Paul's mini pods on the Patreon. Otherwise, you can support us another way for free. You can go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you're listening to us right now. Give us a 5-star review and hit the follow or subscribe button. All right. So as I mentioned, when we kind of signed off last week, I was saying something along the lines of, well, at least we'll know who the Brewers are playing in the playoffs by the time we record again next Sunday night when we usually do these. And of course, because of hurricanes and MLB being weird about scheduling, that's not the case. We need to see who wins a doubleheader between the Braves and the Mets on Monday. So, either way, whoever is going to be the 6th seed is going to come and play the Brewers. Maybe it's the Mets staying in town, but just wanted to run through the various scenarios that will apply on Monday before we decide or see who the Brewers will be facing. So, of course, if the Mets and Braves split the doubleheader on Monday, they both make the playoffs. The Braves have the head-to-head over the Mets, so they would go out to San Diego, and the Brewers would host New York again in Milwaukee. They should just play this thing in Milwaukee, honestly. But if the Mets sweep the doubleheader, they'll become the 5th seed. The Brewers face the Diamondbacks. Likewise, if the Braves sweep, they become the 5th seed, and then the Brewers face the Diamondbacks. So basically, Arizona rooting for a sweep in either direction tomorrow to make it in, and they would head to Milwaukee then. But a split of any kind, the Brewers face the Mets, and I think that seems likely, but we can talk about that. First of all, yeah, the scheduling of this thing, and Ryan, I know we were talking before we started that doubleheader in theory, fine, but it's hard to envision a sweep in either direction unless they just hate that other team so much and they want to knock their rival out of the playoffs and whatever else. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a really weird situation because, of course, the first team, somebody's going to win that first game, and when they do that, they're clinching for the playoffs. Presumably, they're not going to be popping the champagne, because that would be really strange if a bunch of players came out for the second game drunk. I would think MLB would frown upon that and is hopefully sending instructions saying, don't do that. That would look really bad, and we're going to have a real hard time with this if you do that. So presumably, they'll celebrate on the field a little bit and be happy, but I don't think they're going to go and do that until after the game. But at that point,
I thought this was America.
Yeah.
It would be dangerous for the game to be played with drunk players, so they won't do that.
Yes.
It would be not dangerous to play with everybody on LSD, so maybe they'll do that. But as we've seen in baseball's history, but they'll probably come out and at least be professionals about it, I think.
Yeah, we would hope so. But yeah, it is really hard to imagine a scenario where the team that won game 1 does anything in game 2 as far as managing to win, right? They're not going to pitch anybody that they want to have any sort of impact on the series. So they're going to be running out. They do get an extra roster spot for this, so they'll have another pitcher up for this. So they'll have somebody from their 40-man, and they're just going to lean as heavily on that extra person as they possibly can to do this. And so it's just really hard to envision a scenario where they end up not splitting, right?
I think here's me envisioning that scenario, which is the extra player they bring up is a pitcher who has one of those games where the other team is unfamiliar with them and their repertoire, and they know they're going to have to eat this one, and they go out and they pitch a gem for 7 innings, and at that point they're like, okay, let's just get this done for him with the back of the bullpen, and then they sweep it. I think, and the other team's going to be tight because they know they have to win it, and sometimes you have the expectation that it's going to be easy. You're going to get the team not trying as hard, and that makes everybody tighten up. You can't assume these things in baseball. Like, it's totally possible for a guy from AAA to come up and with nothing to lose and just completely shut down a team that's playing for their playoff lives, that is like starting to choke because they know they should be winning this and aren't. So that's my nightmare scenario, because I don't want to play Arizona. I've already figured out how it's going to happen.
Nope.
Yeah, that is definitely the nightmare.
Yeah. That kind of leads us to our first Patreon question from Luke Roy's Suitcase, asking, what's the ideal wildcard situation, not just in terms of team, but also including the Monday game situation? So I think we're all on board of saying we don't want to do Arizona again. We've seen that series and we didn't like it. So please come back, Mets. We like beating you. But I guess the ideal situation, right, is the split doubleheader, because both teams will have to kind of expend what they can to just make sure that they're in it. And, you know, if it means the Mets waste Edwin Diaz or something and he's unavailable for game one, that probably works out in the Brewers' favor, right, Paul?
Yeah. I think ultimately that's the dream scenario, is that it is a split and the Mets, one way or another, have to use a lot of resources to get the split. I guess ideally, I think what I'd like is for them to have to use a lot of resources in game two. But as Ryan said, that's less likely to happen. You know, it's not impossible because baseball is wacky, but it's more likely that the teams will be focusing on getting game one. So, but you know, that's what we want. We don't want to play Arizona. We want to play the Mets. And we want the Mets to be in as bad a situation as possible when we get to play the Mets. That's it.
So I can tell you kind of a nightmare scenario that came up to me as I was watching MLB Network, and they were talking, do you guys realize that Chris Sale like hasn't pitched in 10 days? And basically, the noise that is coming out of Atlanta is basically they're not going to pitch him unless it's a must-win game. So they're not having him throw in game one tomorrow. They're having him potentially available to throw game two if necessary in that game. What that screams to me is that Chris Sale is broken and that like Chris Sale shouldn't be pitching. But they're potentially putting him in a situation where if he would have to pitch in that late game, I'm worried that if the Mets take game one, that the Braves are going to throw Chris Sale. Chris Sale is potentially broken. He gives up 7 runs in the first inning, gets yanked from the game, and the Mets walk to an easy sweep in the series. That's my nightmare scenario. So I guess I would kind of like to avoid Sale, period.
On the one hand, I'm kind of like, are they going to do that if he's really broken? Won't they know he's broken? But on the other hand, we did it with Sean Markham once, who's not Chris Sale. So fair point.
I mean, yeah, that was also in a different era of baseball. Things weren't quite as locked down and analytical as they are now. But yeah, you would hope they wouldn't do it if they know he's actually broken. But that is apparently what they're saying right now, is that they're going to have Chris Sale pitch game two. So that makes me a little nervous. I guess from that perspective, a clean Braves win in game one is probably the best possible scenario. Does that make sense? Like,
Sure.
just like the Braves cleanly winning, not like big, but just cleanly winning. Maybe the Braves winning big in game one is the best scenario, because then the Mets know, well, okay, we're going to have to save all of our ammunition to shut them down, like pitching wise. In like, if the Braves get out to a big lead, then they know, okay, well, we're gonna have to save our ammunition. They'll hold their pitching in reserve for that case, and then go at it in game two. So maybe that is the best, is like a clean Braves win in game one, if we want the split, which we're all agreed we don't want Arizona, right? We have no.
Yeah, we are all on the same page there.
Yes.
Okay. So maybe that's the best thing to root for. I don't know. It's baseball, man. Trying to predict this stuff, just like it's insane.
Yeah, I will say Chris Sale, 75 innings more this year than he pitched last year, because he's made it through a full season. So that's a factor. So even if he's not broken, maybe they know he's only got maybe 2 or 3 starts left in that arm before he kind of gives out there too. All right. Michael Parr, our next Patreon question about the playoffs, asking, are the Brewers vulnerable to anything in particular heading into the playoffs? Previous years, they've had weaknesses to things like left-handed pitching, but they seem more balanced than in other years. Enough of each hand in the lineup and the bullpen to cover whatever contingency comes up. So I guess any glaring things. I mean, we all say that we don't want to face Arizona, and I feel like it's just because, I mean, look at those last few games at AmFam and last year. Like that team is capable of putting up runs in a hurry. But Paul, I guess any glaring thing that could be the Achilles heel in this playoff run for the Brewers.
It's not. I think it's different than previous years. But the glaring thing is, I just think offense. It's their offense isn't terrible, but if they run into a kind of some kind of doppelganger version of themselves, a sort of a mirror image with maybe a couple dominant starters and a good bullpen, the Brewers lineup can get shut down with some regularity. And that's, I think, if they're going to bow out of a series, it's going to be because they go cold at the wrong time, they catch a team just with lights out pitching, and they get outground by somebody like that. That's it. I feel like in the past, it's always been they've just run out of pitching at some point against like the Dodgers, and had a bit like Suter out there, and Suter's great against like the Pirates of the world, but when he has to face the Dodgers lineup, it's the most terrifying thing on earth. They don't have that this year. It really is just, I think the offense needs to show up and get them like 4 runs and they can get it done. But that's where things get tricky. They're not a dominant offense. They're just an average offense with some holes.
Yeah, I think that's probably right, because the offense, even though it is like top 5 in terms of run scoring in baseball, their underlying numbers, the WRC plus, is more like 10th to 12th. So they're not an elite offense on a at-bat to at-bat basis. They're a solid offense who hits well with runners in scoring position. Now, that seems to be something of a pattern for them over the last basically like 3-4 years, where they've been a good hitting team with runners in scoring position. I know people don't believe that, but it's true. They've been much better hitting with runners in scoring position than they've been overall for a while here. So
Yep.
that has been what has propped up their offense, frankly, in most of these years. So yeah, it's interesting. I guess I'm a little bit worried that, especially in these short series, this becomes less of an issue if you make it to the 7-game series. But in these short series, I'm a little bit worried about a blow-up start from someone too. Where
Fair.
And granted, they'll probably pull the plug pretty quickly on anybody who is in the process of blowing up. But sometimes it doesn't take that much. I mean, you can do a lot of damage, in the early innings, give up a 3-run homer or something like that, because you're not pulling a pitcher like that. And if you get behind early on in some of these things, you could see it start to spiral, and you can see the offense start to get out of their approach, which is an extremely patient grind pitchers down approach. And if they start getting a little impatient trying to make things happen, you worry about something like that. But frankly, you could worry about that in any series at any time, because that's just baseball, and that's just especially the nature of postseason baseball, especially now that we have all these stupid short series out there. So you just kind of have to worry about that in general. You just have to remember, baseball's postseason is not like other postseasons. It's just not. So any old thing can happen.
That's the second time Ryan has said baseball is just baseball. This podcast, if you're carrying on and counting in your head, we'll just keep track of that.
Start a drinking game before that, and somebody will die, James. Like, you're gonna kill someone.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of dying, Sal Frelick, R.I.P. Because regardless of who the Brewers end up playing in the first round, roster is going to be a little shorthanded because Sal went YOLO and decided to dive for a foul ball, or at least go up against that left or right field wall, I should say, and just managed through the Brewers' good injury luck, the same one that sliced Darren Ruff's knee a couple of years ago. That Brewers injury luck just decided that let's just place Sal's hip into this like steel frame in the wall and give him a bruise. So He needed help like walking initially after that. That didn't sound good, but he's still limping around, but the Brewers haven't put him on the injured list because, the way the postseason rules work, he'd have to be out for until the NLCS, I think, would be the first chance for him to come back. So it's one of those where it's definitely keeping him from playing, but the Brewers can't afford to lose him for that long. So I guess JVT comes down with the bottom line here, asking how big of an impact will Sal's injury have on this playoff roster? So, Paul, obviously Sal, his offense is not why he'd be on the postseason roster, but he's been plenty valuable there too. And I think the biggest thing too is like without him, you suddenly have not that very many healthy outfielders. So I guess how do you see that affecting the postseason roster?
I think the good news, to the extent there's good news, is that they can get by a few games. Sal Frelick is a useful outfielder, a very good defender. His offense, we've made fun of Sal plenty. You all know what his offense is. He has an 83 OPS plus on the year. It's not a huge deal. Like they can get by without him, and they can cover the outfield well enough with the outfielders they do have. It does leave a bit of a hole. Like, he's not certainly, he can do some stuff with the bat. He is not 100% atrocious. If you really need to, you can stick Jake Bauers out there for a bit. But even outfield defense wise, like Garrett Mitchell is still really good at outfield, and Blake Perkins is still really good at outfield. So you can still make yourself have a good outfield, but just with the two of them. Churrio's good too. Honestly, it's not a huge deal. It's really not. What it really does mean is there's probably going to be one kind of wild card bat that ends up on the team. I think we'll probably talk about who that is a little bit later, but that's what it is more than anything. Is they have to make a decision on how they're going to replace him with a weird position, with another outfielder, with maybe somebody who has a little pop. But by and large, starting lineup wise, I don't think it's actually a big deal at all. Sal's fine, but he's not great or good, really.
So it is kind of interesting that I think the problem here is against lefties. And that's weird because Sal Frelick is a lefty, and I don't think, I'm looking it up right now, I don't think he's been particularly good against left-handed pitching. But the problem is that Garrett Mitchell, his replacement, is actually really bad against left-handed pitching to the point that you really wouldn't want to start him. And that leaves you in a tough position because the replacements here are Jake Bauers, also a lefty, also a guy with platoon splits who you don't really want to be starting against lefties. And I guess Isaac Collins, more on him in a minute because we got to talk about that. But so from that perspective, I think this is kind of a problem. And really the issue here more than anything is that left-handed side of things. And this, I guess, is where, I don't know, this is where you really Sal Frelick would be a fourth outfielder now if Christian Yelich were healthy. And so this would be a complete non-issue. Him going down just, has further eviscerated what they have in the outfield, and just nothing they have has really seemed to work here. Yeah, okay. So Sal is basically the same hitter against right-handed pitching as he is against left-handed pitching. His OPS against right-handed pitching is 655. His OPS against left-handed pitching is 654. So he is basically the same hitter. A little bit more pop against lefties, and a little less on base, but it's, it basically all comes out in the wash. So I think the problem here is lefties.
Garrett Mitchell's better against lefties than Sal Frelick is. He just is. Over the course of his career, he is, and this season he is. So
Garrett Mitchell, but okay, so this is a little bit strange then because they were not playing Garrett Mitchell this weekend against lefties. They had Isaac Collins in left field and did not start Garrett Mitchell. I guess did Mitchell start in center field? I'd have to go back and look. I was kind of half paying attention to these things, even though I was at the game on Saturday.
I don't know if they played him all, but he is better than Frelick is as a hitter. He just is. He has a this year he has a 678 OPS, which is bad, but still better.
Yeah,
and for his
that
career,
is.
he's got a 740 OPS against lefties, so pretty good.
Yeah, I wonder what's going on. So I guess we can expect to see Mitchell in right, or yeah, I guess we can expect to see him and Churio and Perkins out there. I don't know. Maybe
That's what I would do.
they were probably just playing Isaac Collins so much this weekend to see if he could do it, to give him the experience doing it, because he's going to have to come in and play left field in the case somebody gets hurt. That's probably what this is more than anything.
Well, I feel like at the end too, post clinching for the Brewers, it's really just like you need guys to have innings to rest the guys that are important. So you call up garbage guys to play a little bit, and that's what he is, I think.
Yeah, I think he is too. He had a good season in AAA, and so I think it's kind of a reward for that. And also, they just needed that extra body who it had a lot of positional versatility. That was the biggest thing going for Isaac Collins. But yeah, okay. So Mitchell, okay, you've made me feel better. So Mitchell is a little bit better than Frelick against lefties. So okay, so he's gonna play, and that's okay. I guess I can get over that. Oh yeah, that's right. He was playing on Saturday night against lefties. He laid down a bunt against the lefty after, was it Churio doubled and he bunted him over to third. So we got that to look forward to against lefties. So that's something for us to be excited about, I guess.
All right, JVT also in that question was asking who takes Sal Frelick's place. We've kind of talked about some of the possibilities, but I guess that really comes down to a roster crunch on the hitting side for the postseason roster, right? So you got to figure that Contreras and Sanchez for sure. Haas seems likely in the event that Sanchez is DHing. You got Hoskins, Bowers, as we mentioned, Terang, Adames, Ortiz, Monasterio seems kind of likely just for that positional versatility you were talking about, Ryan. And then we've got obviously Churio, Perkins, Mitchell, all being the locks. So I guess by the math, that would kind of leave one spot left on the roster that has to go to a position player. So who do we think it's going to be? Is it going to be Isaac Collins, who, Paul didn't realize existed until about 20 minutes ago, or is it somebody else? Tyler Black, maybe, Paul. What do you think?
I think I would guess Tyler Black, just because of having some experience and can walk into some power. But I don't know. This is probably going to be one where it's determined by a guy with a spreadsheet looking at potential platoon matchups and stuff like that. And if it was just another outfielder, it wouldn't surprise me that much. If it was actually Hicklin for that reason, it wouldn't surprise me that much, even though he's really only had a cup of coffee, because he can step in and play outfielder and is at least a little bit, has some wheels, which they do like too. But I feel like this is a dart throw, and I'll go with Black just because he can actually hit a little bit at the major league level. That's all I got.
Yeah, I think it's Collins just because they were playing him to see this weekend, and I don't think any of these guys are really going to get playing time. I think this 13th spot is really just they have to have a 13th hitter on the roster, but I don't think they're going to play more than 12.
You can't say that. You just can't. It always happens when you say stuff like that. Oh, the last guy will never. They always play.
Yeah,
you're gonna get into.
See, Wicker gotten at that last year with the.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. This seems like Murph leans more heavily on his starters than most teams tend to. Certainly than Craig Counsell did. Craig Counsell loved using his bench, and Murph seems less inclined for that. So, but yeah, I mean, they have to have 13 players. I'm going to go with Isaac Collins, because if they had wanted Tyler Black up, like, they could have put him on the roster and had him get some at bats this weekend, but they felt it was more useful to see what Isaac Collins could do in the outfield than give Tyler Black some plate appearances. So I'm just going to lean on what they did this weekend as being an indicator of what they're going to do come Tuesday. But who knows?
Tyler Black was in town, I think, in the event that Sal would have to go on the IL. So he was at least on the periphery there. If that indicates anything. Moving over to the pitching side, a lot more questions, I think it's safe to say. Starting with, I guess, the starters. Who's going to start these games? Because, there are certainly guys who have done better lately, or guys you might feel a little bit better about, like Peralta. But as I've mentioned before, I would be shocked and maybe probably even mad if any of these starters pitched more than 4 innings in this opening series at the very least. But let's just kind of focus in on that first series, whether it's against the Mets or the D-backs. Who starts these 3 games? Obviously, I think, Paul, the presumption is Freddie's game 1, but what do you do if, say, he has another 35 pitch first inning or blows up again?
Yeah,
And then
you gotta have the backstop ready for a Freddie blow up for sure. You gotta get one of your long guys ready, whoever happens to make the roster. Whether that's like DL Hall or Koenig or one of those guys, just have them. I mean, that's the Brewers' MO anyway. That could happen to any of these guys. But I think Freddie's for sure. I really hope Tobias Myers is one of them because I feel like he's their best starting pitcher. And so I would like that to happen. And I actually like what Montez did at the end of the season. And plus, I like that he throws hard and isn't just an off-speed merchant. I feel like in the playoffs that doesn't play as well a lot of the time. Those are my votes. But Aaron Savali's been fine. I think Colin Ray is the guy. Nobody trusts Colin to actually start, and he's been a soldier about doing other things, coming in as a long man, coming in as a relief pitcher. So I think he's right out because the team has told us basically you're not starting in the playoffs. See what you got doing the stuff that's not starting. But those are the 3 that I would like to see start. And if they swerve to Aaron Savali, who's been okay lately, that's fine too. But I like Frankie Montas throwing 98, and I like Freddie. If you get the good Freddie start, that's great. And I like Tobias because he's the best starting pitcher on the team.
So Montas was better on Friday than he was in his previous start where he gave up 8 runs. That was against the Diamondbacks. That was that nightmare Sunday game where, he gave up a bunch and then the Brewers came roaring back anyway. So, the Montas thing, this stuff about pitch tipping makes me wonder if they're telling the truth or not, or if this is total BS.
I don't know.
So I don't know about that. That came up again on the broadcast today. They were talking about it a little bit. Savali has been better recently, mostly because he just doesn't have that blow-up start that Montas does. But Montas, aside from that, is fine. But that blow-up start really is just weighing heavily in my mind, especially if we end up against the Diamondbacks. I think if we end up playing the Mets, I'm much less concerned about it. If it's the Diamondbacks, I'm going to be sitting there and chewing my fingernails on Tuesday because that just seems like a potential problem. I think Savali has been better against them, but these are all small sample sizes, so I should not read into those things. I would say that Tobias Myers definitely won't start game 2.
He will not,
right?
No,
because
he's your game 3 break glass in case of emergency guy.
Maybe, but do you trust a guy who's a rookie in a clinching or in a winner take all game situation? Do you trust him to not let that get too big for him and have a blow up? Because that could be the end of your season right there. So are they going to
more than I trust everybody else who's a starting pitcher on this team to do that? Yes.
I mean, more than Savali and Montas?
Yeah, totally. Yes.
Okay.
100%.
I don't know. I'm not sure. He has a tendency to get himself into some trouble. And then he's generally worked his way out of trouble, but he's also been shakier. He had his best run sort of through the middle of summer and has been shakier the last, 6 weeks or so than he was before that. So I'm not sure
the last time he did.
Except for and the other thing is, and this is what I'm wondering too, is will we see Koenig go as an opener for him, especially against any team that, say, runs out a couple of power lefties in their first 4 or 5 batters, especially against the Diamondbacks. Would you see Koenig come out and serve as an opener against the Diamondbacks? I think probably yes, and I think that would make a lot of sense to see that. So I think if we're going to see an opener, it's associated with it's Koenig and it's for Tobias Myers, right?
Quite possibly, yes.
Yeah. So we'll see. That third game is going to be, if they get there, I mean, obviously it's going to be fascinating and it's going to be white knuckle time. So we'll see. But
Fascinating is definitely a word.
yeah.
Wanting to not be alive anymore, also a word. So I guess considering all those guys are probably going to be on the postseason roster, and it's safe to assume that like Williams, Miguel, Payamps, Koenig, Ashby, maybe Ross and Hall we could throw in as, sort of the locks. So that leaves you kind of with Colin Ray, who threw 100 pitches to take one for the team on Sunday, and has been operating as like that key long man in the bullpen. Hobie Milner, who's I don't know why he's still on the roster at all, but we can talk about him being on the playoff roster. Nick Meters just came back, obviously, and has serious home run issues, and again is not what you want to see from any of your pitchers in the postseason. Bryan Hudson, hasn't pitched in the big leagues in a month. He's kind of been sent down just to manage his workload, and then Bryce Wilson has been on the IL. So I guess, Ryan, do you see somebody coming sort of out of left field like Carlos Rodriguez or Kevin Hergetz of the world? How do you see the back end of the pitching staff playing out?
So, yeah, I think first off, Ross and Hall are basically locks for me just because I don't see people that would make sense to put in ahead of them. And both have done good work out of the pen when they've been asked to be out of the pen. Hall's real problem was that game against Arizona where he was asked to start. He gave up the 5 runs, but other than that, both him and Ross have been good out of the pen. So I think those guys are basically locks. I think Hobie Milner's a lock too. I think Milner's as good a lock.
Why? Why?
Because they trust him.
You have 12 other lefties. You should trust more.
Yep.
I mean, yes, but also they have to find 9 people to do this, and Milner has. Jack Stern did a cataloging of this over at Brewer Fanatic. Go read the thing. He basically talked about how he has, when he's not giving up 3-run homers, he's been very good in September. So it's like it's very and then some of those have been inherited runners too, so that's not necessarily just his fault. But I don't think Hobie Milner is going to see high leverage action in the postseason, but I think he's a guy that is potentially there to soak innings. How valuable that is in this 3-game series format,
0.
I don't know. I mean, well, it potentially is, but hopefully for the reason of you have a big lead. But yeah, I don't know exactly, but I've been skeptical of Hobie Milner for a very long time, and I think he's going to be on this roster. So I think that is going to happen. I guess Nick Mears, maybe. I don't know. I don't think they're going to bring back Bryan Hudson, who just they seem convinced that his sweeper is broken. Jack again has done a great job cataloging this, what's going on with him in AAA. And if he was going to be back on the big league roster, wouldn't they have brought him back a week ago when the AAA season ended? Wouldn't that have been the natural time to do that? So I don't know. The last spot, it probably is Nick Mears or maybe Colin Ray, and I don't know.
I'll take Colin Ray over Nick Mears, who I'm not impressed by and appears to be terrible. And what the dumb thing about this whole thing is we could have a couple of minor league studs who never came up and not be discussing Nick Mears and Hobie Milner at all. And
should they have done that?
Which is dumb. That's the worst part of this. And I plan on tweeting a lot. Oh, it'd be nice to have Craig Yoho pitching right now during this series. That will happen at least a couple times.
It's right after your contact play tweet.
Yep.
The problem with the Colin Ray thing is the 106 pitches on Sunday, he probably wouldn't be available at all for any action until Thursday. So until a winner-take-all
elimination
game.
day.
Yeah, I think Colin Ray, if they make the next round, Colin Ray will be on that roster. I have no doubt he'll be on that roster. I just think for this series specifically, I don't know if there's utility there. So this is kind of a weird thing where I think Colin Ray is definitely one of the 9 relievers for this team if they go on to the DS, but I don't think in this round, like, would you want to throw Colin Ray in a winner take all game on Thursday with having, basically coming back on short rest from having pitched 106 pitches on Sunday? I think they probably are going to elect to go a different direction there. So, but I think he would be if they advance. I think he makes the roster.
All right, let's jump to some Patreon questions because we do have one kind of about the bullpen. Michael Heitkamp asking, even if Bryan Hudson's stuff isn't as good as it was earlier in the season, he's still better than Milner and Mears, right? It's just crazy to me that he doesn't seem to be in their postseason plans. So, like you guys were just saying, I don't know, Paul, if the sweeper's just broken, and then that's obviously his big trick, right? So maybe that explains it, but aren't you surprised a little bit too? That's kind of been radio silence.
It's pretty weird, and it has been well cataloged that apparently is not working. I think it's we all have our there are these guys that we should be talking about instead of the last 2 guys in the bullpen, and I think there's rational cases for all of those guys, like including Bryan Hudson, but I think we're all right to a certain extent because we have better options than Hobie Milner and Nick Mears. Like those exist. We have those things. We're not pitching them because of youth inexperience. We made them eat 100 pitches the other day, and various other reasons. And it's unfortunate that it's come to that. And I'm going to complain very loudly about it if it costs us any games.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on with this. Oh, another name I should have added in there too is Elvis Peguero, who we haven't seen now in like 2-3 weeks.
Yeah, he's still a guy.
Shoot me through the head right now.
So like, there's another guy who could just like randomly show up. But again, the fact that we have the fact that they called up Kevin Herget to pitch earlier this week instead of Elvis Peguero suggests to me that Elvis Peguero, like Bryan Hudson, is not really in their plans for this postseason, which a month and a half ago would have seemed kind of crazy. That I would have assumed especially 2 months ago or something, I would have assumed both of those guys would be in the postseason bullpen, but this stuff is so in flux, and just the way that pitching works nowadays, guys just getting hurt or becoming ineffective out of nowhere or whatever, all this stuff is so due to fluctuate. Kind of who knows on that stuff. I think the fact of the matter is these are the lowest leverage arms in the bullpen and probably aren't. If you get to that point, things have either gone very, very well for you or things have gone very, very poorly for you. And either way, it probably doesn't matter. I guess the one fear would be like a big, long extra innings game where you end up needing everybody, like your 18 inning postseason affair, those sorts of games.
No Manfred man in the postseason.
Right. So it can just go and drag forever at that point. But even so, there's so many guys who can go multiple innings that we know are going to be on this roster. Ashby, Joe Ross, DL Hall, all those guys, Koenig, all those guys are capable of giving you more than one good inning at a time. So those guys could definitely chew some innings that way too. But yeah, this is, I put on there this question about like, should they have brought up Miz or Yoho or both of them in September to see what they could do?
Absolutely. Yes. 100%.
Maybe. The thing is, they would have a better idea than we would if how ready they think those guys are.
Sure. They also have a better idea about saving money than we do.
But this isn't a saving money thing.
It's a little bit, isn't it?
No.
I mean, time spent up is time spent up.
Absolutely not. No. The 100% not a saving money thing. It is potentially a roster management thing. It's them not wanting to take up a roster spot over the postseason or I'm sorry, over the offseason for guys that they didn't think were ready is the only real way to read this. The fact that they took Yoho and Misiorowski and put them in AAA and had them pitching out of the bullpen when they did in September says to me that they were looking at this as a real possibility. And something they saw when they watched this, they didn't like it. They didn't think they were ready to pitch high leverage innings. And if that's the case, if they didn't think that Misiorowski and Yoho were ready to pitch high leverage big league innings, and again, this is an organization that is exceptional at understanding how to develop pitching and like what it takes to make it ready to go. If they didn't think those guys were ready for high leverage big league innings yet, then it wouldn't make sense to put them on the 40 and to bring them up in September, because that's just going to chew up your 40 man over the offseason. I know people are going to groan at that. I get that. But it also just, they must not have thought those guys were ready for high leverage. And if they're not ready for high leverage innings in the postseason, then there wasn't any purpose to putting them on the 40. And they must have made that assessment because nothing else makes sense.
Yep, got to give those high leverage innings to Hobie Milner.
I mean, they're not going to. Hobie's not going to get high leverage innings. Like, that would be insane.
Okay.
So, like, it's going to. So yeah, like Hobie Milner is going to be a low leverage guy at the back of the bullpen, or they're just I don't know. I don't. But the fact of the matter is, with the Yoho and Miz thing, is gotten so controversial. We know this organization gave them a shot in terms of seeing what they could do by calling them up to AAA when they did, to take a look at them and to see if they were ready. And the only reasonable inference to draw here is that they didn't think they were ready because they're not here. Because the service time thing doesn't matter. It does not matter. Especially in the case of Yoho. But for either one of them, the service time thing just so does not matter. Service time manipulation, those guys are going to be up and down at some point in the next few years anyway. Like, almost certainly they're going to be sent back down, especially if they're planning on making Misiorowski a starter. So this isn't about service time manipulation. It's about 40-man roster spots. And that, I don't know, they use 40-man roster spots better than basically any team in the league other than, I don't know, the Rays or somebody. So, like, them in Cleveland and the Rays, like, they use 40-man roster spots. It's a big part of what they do. So they must not. The only thing that I can really see is likely here is they just didn't think they were ready. And I don't know. They would know better than I would.
All right. Moving on. Price Trozen has a question asking, this isn't really about the playoffs themselves, but the lead up to them. With the playoffs and the position clinch, shouldn't Murph be drilling into the guys to not make risky plays like Sal did? I know players like him quote, don't play with the throttle, like Yelly said, but geez, oh, Pete, you got to have some awareness out there. Save the cycle plays for the playoffs, right? I guess, Paul, any issues on the guys still going kind of all out or putting themselves in that position with everything locked up?
I mean, yes, don't. And he should have told. I'll bet Sal Frelick is. I don't know him. I've never met him. I never will, and I've not seen a single interview with the man ever. But I'm going to guess that Sal Frelick is the kind of guy who goes 110% at everything he's ever done, because he's up there. He's got to be a slappy guy to even be in the bigs, and he's probably in the gym every day. And well, a lot of them probably are, but he's probably in the gym twice a day. And his dad probably raised him practicing 8 hours a day playing baseball. And he's I think one of those guys who doesn't know how to do it any other way, and so gets himself killed somewhat regularly. And so you can't really coach that out of people. That is my read there. Not a team thing. I bet it's very Sal specific, and I bet he will run into a wall again as soon as he's capable of being back on the field.
Yeah,
right.
All of that. Yeah, he shouldn't have done it. There should have been some discussion of not doing it. Who knows? There probably was some discussion of not doing it, but I don't think Sal Frelick has an off switch that way. And so I think this is just part of the deal that you get with somebody like Sal Frelick. So Yeah, he's a hockey player. He'll probably figure out a way to be out there. All this time we've spent on trying to figure out who the 13th man on the hitting side of the roster is going to be. It'll probably be Sal Frelick, just because, I don't know, he'll start popping painkillers or something and just get himself out there.
I bet he knows all the best painkillers too.
He's a hockey player, so yeah, definitely.
Yep. All right. Baseball needs more chest lettuce, asking this week. So it appears, based on the amount of promotional and discount emails I've received, the Brewers are having a hard time selling wild card tickets. Is there wild card fatigue in the fan base? Should we care as fans? Will the fans be more excited about a divisional round series? Paul, I guess what's your feeling on this? They have been to the playoffs now, 4 or 5 or 6 years. Is there like fatigue that sets in, especially when you can't like get past the first round?
Yeah, you got two kinds of fatigue here. The first fatigue is that you've made the playoffs a lot lately, that people in Milwaukee have had to, not had to, but kind of had to, because if you are a season ticket holder like Ryan is, like my parents were, you got to commit a lot of money to playoff tickets when they come due. And it is something you think about. But aside from that, there's a bigger fatigue here, which is lower level playoff fatigue. This round doesn't seem real because it's very short. When you lose the first game, you're almost always doomed, and it doesn't seem like it actually is the playoffs that count until you get into the next round. And it's not helped by the fact that it's played starting on a Tuesday, which people got to work. So and it starts at an annoying time of day. Like you're kicking off work early if you're going to this. So yeah, this is, if I was trying to not sell playoff tickets, I would make this weird round where crazy crap can happen and it doesn't really matter. I'd schedule my first game on Tuesday at 4:00. And yeah, that's how you don't sell playoff tickets. Anything other than that would sell more playoff tickets. This is the way to sell the least amount of playoff tickets possible.
Yeah, so there is a familiarity breeds contempt thing going on, because I always remember back in the day, Braves fans would take a lot of crap for this. They would show the Goodyear blimp during the division series in the late 90s, when they're coming off another 100-win season with their three aces and Chipper Jones and Andrew Jones and, all the great players that the Braves always had. They would show a shot of the stadium, and like the upper deck would basically be empty during the divisional series. And this was at the old Turner Field. And that was just because the Braves were in the playoffs every year, and like basically it was wake me up when they get to the CS or the World Series. So people were just waiting for those to happen because that was what they cared about, because they were in the playoffs every year. So the first round just didn't mean anything anymore to them. There's definitely some of that going on here. There's also, Paul making the schedule point is very good, but there's a bigger one, and this is something I'm acutely aware of as somebody who's managing my season ticket group, trying to figure out who's going to what games. Was in the past week, all I got from everybody was, well, I don't know until they announce the game times. And the game times weren't announced until literally 2 days before. And so people were worried, justifiably, that we could get socked with the 12:30 start or whatever. And so the fact that it's the 4:35 start on Tuesday, that should free things up. A lot of people can get off work early enough to make that work, or get off, like people who work earlier and then get off a little earlier can make this work. I'm going to the games and I'm not having to take off any work because I'm done by about 3:30. So this is not a problem. But there are also, for the later games in this series, you've got a 6:30 start and I think a 7:30 start on Thursday if it goes to a third game. So that should free things up. And I think now that people know the game times, tickets should be selling reasonably now that people know, oh, okay, 4:35 on Tuesday, I can make that work. And figure out a way to leave work a little bit early or whatever to make it work. So I think those things all matter some. But yeah, it's not going to be every seat in the house filled and standing room only, hundreds of people in SRO, the way that it was in 2008 or in when they went to the NLCS in 2011 or 2018 in these early rounds of the playoffs now, because, well, one, we've been there so much, and two, it's also just there's so much further to go. There's so many more rounds and layers to get through that it isn't that big an event yet. But I would assume they will have no problem selling tickets if they start advancing. That would, I think, be very, very good for them in a lot of ways.
All right, I guess semi-related to this discussion, because while we're talking about how things are scheduled for this first series, especially, Brian Polakowski asking, now that we're a few years into this playoff format, is baseball's expanded wild card really increasing teams trying to stay in contention, or is it really about owners getting 8 more guaranteed games of national TV revenue? I think we know which one that is,
it's just
considering the first round game is scheduled only for TV. Otherwise, everybody would be playing at 7 p.m. local time at the same time. So, Paul, like, this is obviously a huge moneymaker. Like, ESPN was trying to get this thing created, and then for years, and then the pandemic happened, and they had an out. So, I mean, the series quality also hasn't been good. There's only been one of these things out of the 8 played that's actually gone 3 games. So, this is basically it, right?
I think the argument was also that I think Americans do like their playoffs to be a little bit more random than they have been in the past with longer series. It's not true, by the way. Like, basketball loves longer series because it makes the popular good teams win, and like, people like football's weird though, because you can't play a whole series of football because people die like in football. It's very hard on the body. That they would play infinity more football if they could find a way to do it. But yes, this is just a cynical TV money grab. It's ridiculous. It's a 3-game series. Baseball was never meant for a 3-game series. It is a regular season, fine, not for a playoff game though. Like, it's supposed to be an actual series where you have familiarity and have to make pitching decisions and crap like that. It is only for television, only for cash. It is bad for the sport, and I hate it, and it should go away.
So I'm going to disagree a little bit. You're absolutely right that it is those things. It is a cynical cash grab. It is about getting these 8 more guaranteed games, 8 to 12 more games for TV revenue and all that. It is definitely those things. But there's also the side of this that it's for owners, so that the more playoff teams are in, the less incentives. Yeah, you know where I'm going with this. We talked about this a lot back when this was decided. It's about owners. The more playoff teams get in, the less incentives there are to spend on the high end on making a juggernaut roster, because the more layers of playoffs, the more randomness is in there, and it also will just it makes less sense for a team that is, say, at 88 wins to try to get up to 95 wins. Like, 88 is fine. 88 in almost every year in this thing, the way this is going to work now. I know there's somebody who's going to get 89 wins probably who's not going to make the playoffs this year in all likelihood. Like, the Diamondbacks could get left out with 89. But for the most part now, it's like 86, 87 wins will do it. And that has a financial benefit to owners too. When they don't have to spend to go from 88 to 95, that has a benefit too. So there's also that, which is also cynical, benefit to the thing. And what we're all losing out on is just, a better quality of playoffs and less random playoffs than what we're going to get.
Right. Jay Google next up asking a retrospective question, saying, looking back over the season, which Brewers player shocked you the most by his performance? Myers, who was 1-15 over this past 2 years in the minors, as they always say. On the TV broadcast, was it Churio, McGill, Montes, Adames, Hudson? Also, how wild is it that they have more wins than last year's team? None of us definitely could have predicted that, Paul. But I guess, who's your biggest surprise pick of the year?
It's definitely Myers for me, who I view that as just a innings eater at a best case scenario at the start of the season. and I do think literally turned into their best starting pitcher. Was great. Good for Tobias Myers. I'm very glad that the White Sox did not hold on to you. Good work there. That of course makes sense. But yeah, it's wild that they outperformed last year's team. It's insane that they lost so many people from last year. They only got like half a season of Yelich. They lost Burns. They lost Woodruff. They had a lot go against them. This was not a lucky baseball team by any stretch. They did get Churio development, but even that's not that lucky. Like, he's one of the best prospects in baseball. It was at least a little foreseeable that would actually happen. And so it's just totally bonkers. A lot of the other stuff I feel like isn't as crazy. Like, McGill throws 100. That's fine. That's predictable. Montes, first of all, hasn't been great. He's just been okay. And he also throws like 100. I feel like Myers is like, that guy's stuff worked that well. Like, that's the biggest surprise. That's the answer.
Yeah, Montes has some pedigree. Like, he was really good a few years ago and was one of the better pitchers in baseball when he was back with the A's. And then he went to the Yankees and everything fell apart. Adames is having not a year that's super exceeding what he's done in the past. 2021, he was close to this good-ish. So he's had good years also. Like you said, McGill throws 100, and it has been a solid reliever. Not great by any stretch. He was great in the first half, but kind of faded a little bit, started to be a little more home run prone. Churio, obviously, we all thought he was going to be great. He was just great a little bit earlier than we thought he was going to be, but that, the time frames on those things you can't necessarily predict. Myers is the obvious answer here. Burn the witch, like this is the situation where Chris Hook and the Brewers pitching development staff is just the gold standard in the game, or among the gold. They're up there with the very best. If anybody's better than them, it's not by much. Yep. So yeah, Myers is just remarkable story.
All right. Question from Nick Vollendorf this week is Brewers adjacent, involves a former Brewer. So care to comment on what the Pirates did to Rowdy Tellez? Nick asks, shouldn't any team making the playoffs be required to play all 162 games, even if it's an irrelevant doubleheader the day before the playoffs start? So two separate questions here. For those who may have missed it, the Pirates designated Rowdy for assignment when he was 4 plate appearances shy of earning his $250,000 incentive. So that is Bob Nutting, I guess. And then on Sunday, there was some brief panic when Isaiah Kiner-Falefa also likewise was not in the lineup. I think he was 3 plate appearances short, or maybe 4 of getting a $250,000 bonus himself. So people quickly went off on the Pirates again. IKF apparently said, though, or the Nuttings scrambled to get reporters to IKF saying that he declined the chance to play today and wanted the Pirates to give the start to some other kid on the roster to give them a shot. The game didn't really matter. So I guess he willingly gave up his $250,000. But regardless, I feel like the perception of the Pirates being such that everybody just assumed that was the case, Paul, is probably part of the problem.
Yeah, so this is a case where everybody screwed up, and that does include Rowdy Tellez. So first off, on the Pirates side, you can do this kind of stuff and randomly occasionally save a couple $100,000, but it's generally going to be penny wise, pound foolish, because at the margins, you need to attract certain players to actually go to your organization over other organizations. Mm-hmm. And your team is made up of draft picks that you can force to play for you, highly paid people who are going to be guaranteed their money, but it's filled out with, everybody fills out their roster with spaghetti. Like, that is, the Brewers, of course, do that a lot, but everybody in baseball does that. And there are better prospects on the fringes and worse prospects on the fringes, and you want to give those people a reason to go with your organization. They trust your development. You offer some level of loyalty. Loyalty is a scarce resource in baseball, but there are some organizations that treat the fringe is better than others, and the Pirates are not doing a good job with that here. Now, that said, I did see Dan Szymborski raise a very good, very cogent point, which is if you are Rowdy Tellez, you shouldn't negotiate things like this in your contract for two reasons. One of which is you are less likely than many ball players to achieve these in the first place. But more importantly, this is a tax on your playing time. This is something that's likely to get you out of the league if you start to fall below certain minimums. And you would be better served to take lesser, at the margins, lesser guaranteed money versus larger money that you need to hit benchmarks for, and just be on the team because it's already been paid to you, versus have incentives where you could maybe, in some circumstances, never be in baseball again because they don't want to pay you this money. So there is that too. So Tellez's agent screwed up here too, but everybody's bad. That is the lesson here. Everybody is a bad actor in this situation.
Yeah, so obviously the nuttings here are terrible, and the big thing here is you are going to drive players away and players on the fringes like Rowdy. I kind of understand. I think one thing about Dan's point there, I think this stuff is fairly standard looking at contracts for guys in Rowdy's position. I think most of them have these sorts of clauses in their contracts where you're going to get these bonuses for playing time. And the assumption is, of course, that a team isn't going to mind paying a player who is producing a few extra $100,000 like this. And of course, a player is always going to think, well, yeah, I'm going to produce because I'm great. So like the inherent like self-confidence of players is going to work against them and stuff like this, where they're going to assume, well, yeah, of course I'm going to be good because I'm great. So why should I worry about that? I don't know how much of that, like, it could affect him for this year. I would imagine next year he probably won't do this, right? Like,
better not.
I don't think, if I was an agent representing, fringier guys, I don't think I would ever include a playing time bonus. Home runs, RBIs, stuff like that, sure. Stuff where if you are threatening to produce at a very high level and they then cut you, at least going forward, you have this, hey, I hit all these home runs and these assholes cut me, but I hit all these home runs. Whereas, playing time for the Pirates, where it's very likely the end of the season isn't going to mean jack. You're putting yourself in a position to not be on the team there.
Yeah, I mean, at least he did have the guaranteed, like the contract itself was guaranteed. So he's going to make the full guarantee amount. He's just not getting this bonus. That's one advantage baseball has. Baseball players have over some other sports where you can just get cut and the, part of your contract can just magically disappear. So I guess that's a thing. I don't know. It feels like one of those things that I would like to see. Would be really interesting is somebody to do a study on this and see how often these thresholds are met and how often they're not. I'd be really curious to see how that works. And obviously, yes, they probably are less likely to be met for bad teams than they are for good teams. So, if Rowdy Tellez was producing for a team going down the stretch, obviously the Pirates would have no compunction. But part of the deal here is also just like Rowdy Tellez was really bad this year, and he was pretty bad last year too.
He had a 122 WRC plus as recently as August. So I mean, he was on a good tear too, which I think is sort of part of the reason why it was so suspicious that they DFA'd him when they did. He was having a rough September. But he had a pretty solid good. He was
because all I saw all year. Who's the guy that I'm sure we all follow, the Pirates guy who was basically saying get Rowdy off this roster all year long.
Well, yeah, because through May he was horrific. But then in June he had a 154 WRC plus. He had a 140 WRC plus in July.
Okay,
like he reasonably turned himself into Rowdy Tellez, but it was very brutal in that way down his entire numbers.
And then okay, so he got off to a bad start and was digging out of that all year. Okay, 91 OPS plus this year, 81 last year for the Brewers. Yikes. Okay, yep, all right, fair enough.
That 91 OPS plus would look mighty fine instead of Rhys Hoskins in the lineup too. Anyway, last question this week because we're kind of running a little bit long. Beater Pete asking, "Hey guys, just wanted to say I'm here for the baseball. We cannot keep stereotyping these folks based on their screen names, Ryan. Come on. Besides that, I'm currently in Italy right now, and I'm going to miss the wild card and possibly all of the divisional series. If they were to win both, do I just have to stay here? Yes. Yes,
you do.
Mr. Pete, that is the rule. That's why we were about to keep Ryan from re-entering the country, writing to the State Department feverishly every day when the Brewers were on that win streak.
Cost us a bye.
Yeah.
Jerk.
We can have me extradited.
Yep. Yeah,
But-
stay in Italy. Just enjoy the Aperol spritzes and just, don't come back till it's over.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can
and
always catch the parade at the end.
yes. Oh, yeah. Which, so do you think we'll have a parade if they lose the World Series? That's been
No.
all the rage now.
Twice.
Yeah.
I didn't realize they still. So I'm obviously too young because I was born 6 years after the 1982 World Series. I didn't realize he still had the freaking parade, even though they lost Game 7 of the World Series.
Yeah, there was something about that,
this team.
right? I haven't seen the movie, but there's something about the fact that like they had an obligation to the city. Like the city planned it and said, "You're doing this one way or another. Like we don't care if you win or lose."
It's terrible.
Because
We
Bud,
paid for all the streamers already. Come on.
yeah, like, but then it became iconic because like Robin riding his motorcycle through the warning track, like that is iconic. So yeah. By the way, James, just so we don't get angry messages about this, Rhys Hoskins does have a 98 OPS plus this year. So was that 7 points? 7 points better than what Rowdy's done. But yes, it's still not.
I wish I had Rowdy's defense, I guess is what I have to say about Rhys Hoskins' defense.
Nobody's ever said I wish I had Rowdy's defense before. So congratulations on that one. That's a
Broke the
new
record
one.
there.
Yes.
All right. That'll do it for Patreon questions this week. Thanks everybody for signing up and sending those in. Again, patreon.com/MKE tailgate. $2 a month is how you get that. Just like Mr. Beater Pete did in the last week or so. And Ryan, looks like we have a couple more to say thanks to. Who do we have joining up in the last week?
I think it's Supromex. Is that how we should read that as Supromex?
I don't know, man.
Say Supromex. Yeah, Supromex. I don't know.
Oh my God.
The R is capitalized in the middle. One word, R is capitalized in the middle. So I'm not sure.
We're
exactly.
so old.
Yeah,
true.
I don't know. I'm not sure. So, and then Mr. Charcoal is the other one. And both of these were upgrades. They upgraded to a
Nice.
higher level of support.
Ooh.
So yes, we appreciate that too. We will always give you the shout out for upgrading as well. So we definitely appreciate that. So you can get the big bonuses and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Good to see. All right. Thanks, gang. A reminder, patreon.com/MKE tailgate. So that'll do it for this week. I guess we'll shut things down here, see who comes out of that doubleheader on Monday, and see how the Brewers fare in that stupid first 3-game series thing again. Hopefully, at least luck into a win or two. How about that?
Two. Hopefully
yeah,
two.
Yeah.
Well,
Hopefully two.
let's
right in a row.
Not a win.
let's go on the
Hopefully.
record. Will the Brewers season be over the next time we podcast? So when we get together and podcast on next Sunday, is the Brewers season going to be over, or will it still be going at that point? So basically,
No, they're going to get this done.
I think so too.
I'm confident.
Yeah, I have a lot of hopes on this one. I think it should. I have a lot of hopes. I think they can win this.
I will not be surprised either way. Baseball will baseball. So,
take a
all
look.
right. Regardless of what happens, we will be back here to talk about it. Thanks again, everybody. Have a good week. Go Brewers. Please for the Wildcard Series.